All right, guys. This video is mostly for my group of young men at church, my youth group. I want to continue our study of John 6. We're in the second half of John 6, starting in verse 35. This is my favorite part of John 6, maybe even the book of John. You guys know I'm very into like predestination and all that, and they talk about it a lot in this part of the book. So. Everybody likes to focus on something different. No teacher, can cover everything just completely. So this is what I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to have another video about the other topics in John 6. But that being said, a lot of them are predestination. So also in the next videos, there's of course this is a hot topic, kind of a contentious topic. So my next video after this, or one of my next videos is going to be about the objections to this interpretation of John 6. So for now, though, I'm just going to go over the way I think the evidence points, and so starting in verse 35 here. So read John 6 verse 35 through 65, and read it and then watch this video. So. All right, so notice in verse 35 and 36 there, Jesus says, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. But I said to you that you have seen me and yet do not believe." So notice the connection there between coming to Jesus and belief, right? "All that the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me I will never cast out." Okay, so emphasis on that there, right? All that the Father gives to Jesus will come to him. And all those who come to him, he will never cast them out, right? "For I have come down from heaven," this is verse 38, "for I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me." What is God's will? Verse 39, "This is the will of him who sent me, that I should lose nothing of all that he has given me, but raise it up on the last day." So here's how it works. You get drawn by God. You come to Jesus because you were drawn. All that the Father draws. You come to Jesus, he raises you up on the last day. You're given to Jesus, he raises you up on the last day, right? Great. Awesome news. That's music to my ears. So can this fail? If you're drawn given to Jesus, is it possible for you to not be lifted up on the last day? Well, it is the will of God that you're lifted up on the last day, and we know that God's will is always done. God's will never fails. We read here Isaiah 46. Got my notes here. Isaiah 46 verses 9 through 10. "Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand and I will accomplish all my purpose." Right? He will accomplish all of his purpose. Ephesians 1:11, "In him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will." Right? He works all things. A lot of times we hear that and we think, oh, something bad happened. Don't worry, God's gonna turn it around and work it for good because he works all things. Right? But also the things leading up to that bad event, that was also being worked by God, because God doesn't just work the consequences of bad things, or he doesn't just work what happens after a bad thing to the counsel of his own will. It doesn't say, oh, well, God works some things according to the counsel of his will. It says he works all things according to the counsel of his will. Daniel chapter 4:35, "All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done?" Right? No one can even question. Job chapter 42 verse 2, "I know that you can do all things and no purpose of yours can be thwarted." So because of this, because God's will is always done, and it's his will that whoever is given to Jesus will be raised up on the last day, and he won't lose any. If you're given to Jesus, Jesus will lose none of what he's been given. Then we can be confident then, because if you're given to God, if you're drawn to God, if you've come to Jesus, if you believed in Jesus, you're not going to fall away. He's not going to lose you, right? That doesn't happen. All right, so moving on here. So the Jews, what is this? Verse 41. "So the Jews grumbled about him because he said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. They said, is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How does he now say, I have come down from heaven? Right? Fair question. think of some person whatever, I don't know, who you know of their parents, and he says, "My father is in heaven." Well, wait a second. No, your father lives down the street. He's still alive. What are you talking about? So that'd be pretty weird for them to understand. But so Jesus answered them. He says, "Don't grumble. Don't worry about it." Because he says, "No." He says, "Do not grumble among yourselves. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day." He also mirrors verse 37 there in verse 65. Let's see here. He says, "And he said, this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted him by the Father." All right, so connect those three statements together, right? All those, statement one, right? All that are drawn to Jesus will come to Jesus, right? All that the Father draws will come to Jesus. No one can believe in Jesus, can come to Jesus, unless it is granted to them. So from those two statements, then, we can draw the following conclusions. If someone never believes, it's because God never granted it to them to believe. Because if it was granted to them, or if they were drawn, then they would come to Jesus. Because as verse 37 says, all those who are drawn will come to Jesus. And also, if someone does believe, it is because God granted it to them, causing them to believe. Because as verse 44 there says, no one can come to Jesus unless the Father who sent Jesus draws them, right? So if you come to Jesus, if somebody comes to Jesus, the Father drew you. That's how it works. And likewise, you cannot come to Jesus unless the Father draws you. So why? Why is this true, right? Why can't just anyone choose to believe? And it's because all people are evil and no person ever chooses God. 1 Corinthians 2:14, the natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they're folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. Romans 3:11 through 12, no one understands, no one seeks for God. All have turned aside, together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Psalm chapter 14, verses 2 through 3. This is what Romans 3:11 through 12 is quoting, actually. The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is none who does good, not even one. Right? No one does good. Romans 7:18, for I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is in my flesh. For I have the desire to do what is right, but I cannot carry it out. And that was Paul. He didn't have the ability to carry it out. It's not just the people that deny God's existence either. It's not talking about just the wicked people, just the atheists, right? Romans chapter 1, 18 through 20, says that God's existence is plain to everyone, and that people suppress it in their wickedness and unrighteousness. So there's enough there for people to conclude reasonably that God exists. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. Right? So even people that claim not to know that God exists, even people that deny it, it's not just for people that are atheists, because everyone really has enough to know deep down. It's plainly seen, and they've suppressed it in their unrighteousness. All right, so this is where it gets a little bit controversial. If that wasn't controversial already, I guess. We talk a lot about free will, right? That's a big debate point among philosophers, theologians, Calvinists, Arminians, whatever. The truth is, though, that free will doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter. Whether we have free will or not is irrelevant. Because here's the thing. What do we want to believe in free will for, right? We want to believe that everyone has this equally given free opportunity to choose God, right? Well, here's the thing. The opportunity that the chances of any person choosing God is zero, because no one chooses God. No one chooses God. Free will Free will does not change the fact that you are inherently evil, that I am inherently evil, that all people are evil, and that all have turned aside and none seek after God, right? Whether you have free will or not, you don't seek God. You didn't seek God. You never sought God, right? Like Jesus said, don't think that you chose me, but I chose you, right? Your free will, if you have free will, just means that you freely choose evil. That's it. You never choose good. No one ever freely chooses good. All right, so then how is anyone ever saved? If no one ever chooses God, then why have some people been saved, right? Where did that faith come from on their part? They respond, God reached out to them. He drew them. Where did their response come from? Did it come from their own goodness in their heart, their own faith in their heart? Romans 12:3, for by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned them. Right? God assigned them faith. He granted them faith. Ephesians 2, verse 8 through 9, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. Because here's the thing. I've heard people debate, that verse isn't talking about the faith being from God. It's talking about the grace being from God. Well, here's the thing. The purpose of this statement in Ephesians 2, 8, and 9 is that what I have is a gift of God so that I can't boast. But here's the thing. If the faith is mine and it's from my own heart, then I can boast. I can say to someone who doesn't believe, I can say, well, you'd be saved too if just you had as much faith as I did. Oh, I have faith. You should have as much faith as I did, and you would be saved too, right? So that might sound like a pretty jerk thing to say, because it is, right? But if the faith is from my heart, then it's an accurate thing to say. If it's my faith, then I can boast about it, right? If I freely chose and it's my faith, then yeah, if you would choose as faithfully as I did, and you would be as humble as I did, and as righteous as I was, then you would be saved too, right? But it's not. It's not from my heart. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7 says, for who sees anything different in you? What do you have that you did not receive? If then you received it, why do you boast as if you did not receive it? Because I myself received it from God, I can't boast about it. Because that's what the end of the verse says there. Why do you boast as if you did not receive it? So the implication there is that if I did not receive it, then I can boast. I can boast about it. The only reason I can't boast is because I did receive it. I did receive it. It's not mine. It's not from my heart. God granted it to me. It was a good gift from God, right? Faith is a good gift. James chapter 1, verse 17, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Is faith a good gift? Yes, then it came from God. It's as simple as that. It was not from me. It was not that I created the faith out of my own will, my own desire. I'm spiritually dead. Dead bodies don't do anything. In the Old Testament, God had Ezekiel raise the dead bones to life. There was the dead bones didn't say, oh, please make me alive. They were dead, and they were in the ground. They were in a hole, just dry bones. And God's power brought them to life, just like it brought us to life. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 25, correcting his opponents with gentleness, God may perhaps grant to them repentance leading to a knowledge of the truth. Right? God may grant it to them. That word in the interlinear there, it's not just that God is giving them permission, it's that he is giving it to them. He's giving them the repentance. God's the source of it all. He's the one who's given you salvation, and it's because that he gave it to you and that he drew you to Jesus that you are saved. Right? So it's all due to God. 1 John chapter 4, verse 19, we love because he first loved us. All right. So why is this good news? Right? Because then if you're a Christian, your salvation is guaranteed. You're not going to lose it. No one loses salvation. The will of God is this, that of all that Jesus has been given, he would lose none of it. That's the will of God, and God works all things after his own will, and he accomplishes all of his purpose. So because he gifted this to you, he purchased you, right? When you go and purchase something from a store, does it get a say in being purchased? No, of course not. It's a thing, and you buy it, you purchase it. Jesus purchased you with his blood, okay? And, especially, when you purchase something, it doesn't get away from you unless you lose it or something, unless you misplace it or whatever, obviously. But, God's not going to do that. Philippians chapter 1, verse 6, and I am sure of this, that he who began a good work in you, he began it. He began it. He who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ, right? God began the good work in your heart. He began that. The faith was from God. The grace was from God. All good things that you have are from God. All good attributes that you have are from God. What do you have that you did not first receive? Right? You can't boast in that because you did not receive it, or because you did receive it. Misspoke there. You can't boast in it because you did receive it. It's not from your own heart. It's not from your own good. You don't have any good. Just like Paul said in Romans 7:18, he says he desires to do what's good, but he can't. He has the desire to do what's good, but he does not have the ability to carry it out. Right? He can't do it. Neither can you. Neither can I. We can't do it. But God can do it. And that's why it says God will bring it to completion in the day of Jesus Christ. All right, that's it. That's it for John 6. What was that? Verse 35 through 44, and then I jumped to verse 65 there. Like I said, I'm going to cover the rest of the chapter in a different video, and well, maybe, I don't know. We'll see how it works out. And also, there's other interpretations over the way I've just said it. There's some, people that disagree. Obviously, it's pretty, like I said, pretty contentious topic, pretty controversial. So I'm going to do another video on the objections to what I've just said. So, see you guys next time.